People now are obsessed with technology and urbanism. This anthropocentric development of the city many problems. One of them is biodiversity loss and degradation. We should never neglect the impact of nature and biodiversity because it plays a key role in contributing to healthy and resilient urban ecosystems. My thesis design aims at responding to the conflict between urbanism and nature, centering on the stakeholders of non-human species and attempting to rebuild the relationship between human and non-human species through the intervention of architecture, so as to echo the urban ecology and biodiversity strategy of Melbourne in the next 50 years. In the context of rapid urban development, how do we respond to biodiversity loss and rebuild the relationship between non-human species and human through architecture? To answer this question, we should firstly focus on the stakeholders of non-human species. Helmet honeyeater. In 1971, the helmet honeyeater was chosen as Victoria's official symbols, but now there are only left 200 honeyeater in Victoria. The conservation status belongs to critically endangered. Historically, helmet honeyeater was distributed in the Mid-Yarra and Western Port catchments of central southern Victoria. The wide population of the helmet honeyeater is now restricted to remnant bushland along two streams in the Yellingbo Nature Conservation Reserve. About 25% of helmet honeyeater diet is nectar, and 75% comes from other sources, including lobes that are often found on the leaves of eucalypts. Constructed a suspended cup-shaped nest, they are often located in shrubs. Nests are made of strips of bark, grasses, dried leaves, and abound loosely with cobwebs. Honeyeaters can be either noctivorous, insectivorous, frugivorous, or a combination of nectar and insect eating. Unlike the hummingbird of America, honeyeaters do not have extensive adaptation for hovering flight, though smaller members of the family do hover hummingbird style to collect nectar from time to time. They are most commonly in Australia, found also in New Zealand. The rainbow lorikeeted species of parrot found in Australia. It is common along the eastern seaboard, from northern Queensland to southern Australia. Its habitat is rainforest, coastal bush, and woodland area. Rainbow lorikeet feed mainly on fruit, pollen, and nectar. Rainbow lorikeet are important pollinators of eucalypts. They also eat crops such as apples, grapes, and pears. Common features. They are all based in Melbourne and are all addicted to nectar and lobes. Because of urbanization, their living environment and habitat have been destroyed. Therefore, we need to propose ecological strategy to provide them with a good living environment, and at the same time, we need to make them adapt to the current situation of urbanization so that they can live in a new ecological environment created by architects. Current situations show that urban artificial light effect and habitat loss have great significance to avian species. Artificial light may attract birds during migration at night. It can disrupt orientation in night migrating diurnal birds, especially when the sky is overcast. Night can increase nocturnal activities in birds living in illuminated habitats. A frequently observed effect of artificial light is that birds start their dawn song earlier in the morning. Moreover, living in the rainforest and associated habitats can provide a year-round supply of fleshy fruits. Historical declines in habitat over the last 3 generations have thought to have caused a loss of 30% of the population in the last 3 generations. The city's emission, noise, and night are specifically recorded. In addition, human disturbance and wild predators such as cats and dogs pose a threat to urban birds. Thus, the avifauna need defined space in urban areas, for not just providing them shelters, but also shielding them from the brutal environmental conditions in cities. Dating back to 1960s, a group of Japanese architects asserted that architecture should be adaptable and able to respond to disasters, both natural and man-made. Kenzo design focus more on mutability and sustainability. Cities and buildings are not static entities, but are ever-changing organic with metabolism. Building can grow and multiply like cells. No project is too large or too small for the metabolists. Although it is a proposal in dealing with urbanization and population growth, the sustainable idea is worth noticing. Just as metabolism imagined, if we provide different species with a new skeleton to survive, they can develop their civilization by themselves, which I think is a huge success. From this point, I think Great Frame is a powerful tool to help non-human species and human to cohabit together. It can rebuild the relationship between human and species and help them adapt to the urban environment. With time passed, we can insert different functions and purpose into this frame to make it friendly with different stakeholders. To test the hypothesis, I will focus on two sides. One is grid system can benefit to non-human species, and another is grid system can benefit to human. Now we know that artificial light effect and habitat loss are the two significant to urban birds. Therefore, instead of providing them traditional shelters like dovecotes or human-made intervention for surviving, the hollow ecosystem can perhaps be more closely associated with birds, which are built not only as shelters, but also for the micro-natural habitat for bird life. Shelters are not only the requisite for birds to thrive. Habitats must also require access to basic needs such as food and water. Therefore, a small well-framed hollow space with cavities in walls that not only provide shelters for birds, but also has space for planters to create a comfortable habitat as refuge. Birds make short, localized strips from their shelters, essentially for foraging, food, water, and nesting material broadly categorized under station-keeping activities. Traditionally, the design of science hubs tends to focusing on human end users. However, as the new STEAM building needs to include different species in our design consideration, we need to reconsider and rewrite the aspiration of this brief based on Husserl's brief to meet the design demand. The new aspirations are as follows. Provide a transformative student experience, which includes engage students with non-human species, help students observe and interact with species, create a highly collaborative environment to grow a culture of interdisciplinary and convergent research at Melbourne, enhance life science impact through the provision of high-quality research infrastructure, make the precinct an exemplar of sustainability through both high-level environmental and financial performance. Since cohabitation is our theme, therefore I differentiate the grid module in several scales for various stakeholders and link the grid together, thus forming a new symbiotic relationship between human and different species. At the same time, I take advantage of automation technology and prefabrication technology to achieve adding and replacing modular grids. Taking Helmi Hanita, for instance, they currently live in Yalimbo Nature Conservation Reserve. The natural green canopy allows them to reproduce well. Meanwhile, a government agency has started a recovery plan for Hanita, which has staff to help them survive and reproduce, providing them with food, water, and necessary living conditions. In contrast, in 48 kilometers away from the reserve, our site is located at previous uni house in the University of Melbourne. Our site lacks continuous green space due to the excessive urbanization. Therefore, we can only maximize the existing green space and combine the surrounding green space to form a new green canopy to satisfy the life of species. I differentiate several types of grids for different stakeholders and reorganize the grid to simulate the symbiotic environment. 1 meter and 2.5 meter grids, mainly for various species, and 5 meter and 10 meter grids, mainly for the human use. The explosive diagram shows the inner logic of architecture. At the center of the building, 10-meter grid skeleton formulate the research space for students. There are some flexible small-scale grids surround the building, and there are many for constructing the platforms and hollow ecosystem for species. Different scaled micro natural habitats compile together to redefine the new lifestyle of interspecies. At ground level, I also used the small grid frames to simulate the form of natural terrain. The intention is to create a large open space for different stakeholders to hang around and enjoy the sun bath. In the original site, the scattered arrangement of green place roads broke the link between species. Therefore, in this new master plan, I eliminated the original road and centralized the green space system to increase the connection between different species. At the same time, grids with different modules can be copied to make a series of landscape sketches spread throughout the campus, thus to achieve the purpose of connecting different species through a grid system. In terms of the typical plan and section, I arranged open public space at the ground floor and put the majority of the learning and teaching space into the underground level, in the upper level. Mainly for the function of research space, because what I want to create is to enable students to have close relationship with species when they do the research or making observation. The section shows the relationship between inside and outside. This ecological building with lots of hollow ecosystems can do different experiments. I aggregate smaller gray space boxes into larger sculpture units with specific purpose. On the big platform, I create a pond for water retention, and it can test how water plants grow in humid environment. At the middle of the tower, I built a climbable green corridor for species doing activities. Also, the building can be utilized to test vertical plane tolerance. Moreover, all these experiments can also serve wildlife. In terms of the interior space for human utilizing, I intend to create a cozy and warm space for fresh year students and researchers enjoy their time in this ecological building.